Before we dive into a story so chilling it might just redefine the limits of horror, a tale whispered in the dark corners of the internet and spoken of in hushed tones across America, I urge you to take a moment. If you're captivated by narratives that peel back the layers of the human psyche, that explore the darkest corners of human imagination, and that promise to leave an indelible mark long after the final word, then please consider subscribing to our channel, following, or giving this story a like. Your support helps us bring these intricate and compelling narratives to life, allowing us to explore the depths of storytelling. Now, if you're ready to step into the crimson-soaked canvas of a killer's twisted mind, dim the lights, silence your surroundings, and prepare yourself. This is the story of The Sanguine Artist. Los Angeles, a city built on dreams and illusions, was about to be plunged into a nightmare unlike any it had ever conceived. The relentless California sun beat down on the sprawling metropolis, seemingly oblivious to the darkness festering beneath its glittering facade. It was Tuesday, a day as mundane as any other, until the discovery that would shatter the city's complacency. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose face was a roadmap of exhaustion and too many late nights, stood in the opulent, yet now macabre, living room of Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, a seemingly ordinary accountant in her late 30s, had lived a life devoid of controversy. Her neighbors described her as quiet, meticulous, and utterly unremarkable. Yet her death was anything but. The air was thick with the coppery tang of drying blood, cloying and inescapable. Eleanor's body lay sprawled on the plush Persian rug, a stark contrast to the violence that had ended her life. Her throat had been slit with chilling precision, and the weapon, a ceremonial silver letter opener, was nowhere to be found. But it wasn't the brutality of the murder that sent shivers down the spines of the seasoned officers. It was the display. Splayed across the pristine white wall of her living room, rendered in the crimson that had once coursed through her veins, was a breathtaking, yet utterly grotesque, tableau. It was a mural, undeniably a work of art in its execution, if not its medium. The central figure was a woman, her head thrown back, mouth agape in a silent scream, tears of blood streaking from empty eye sockets. Around her, intricate patterns resembling ancient, forgotten runes swirled and coalesced, forming an ethereal, unsettling prophecy. The piece was disturbingly detailed, from the subtle shading of the blood to the implied texture of the canvas. It was named, by the terrified public and later by the media, the Weeping Oracle. Corbin, a detective hardened by 2 decades in homicide, felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. This wasn't a crime of passion, nor a botched robbery. This was deliberate, theatrical, and deeply, deeply sick. The killer hadn't just murdered Eleanor Vance. They had desecrated her, turning her life's essence into a chilling message. Prince. Corbin's voice was a gravelly whisper. Detective Lena Hansen, his younger, sharper partner, shook her head, her face pale. Wiped clean, every surface. The only thing they found was a faint, almost invisible residue of something. Organic, near the window. Not blood. Couldn't identify it yet. And the art. Hansen gestured to the wall, a shudder running through her. The sheer volume, the estimated blood loss from Eleanor alone wouldn't be enough to create something this expansive. They must have collected it, perhaps in advance, or... She trailed off, the unspoken implication hanging heavy in the air. The killer might have drained Eleanor completely, or even had other victims. The initial autopsy confirmed Hansen's fears. Eleanor Vance had been exsanguinated. Nearly every drop of her blood had been meticulously drained, leaving her body a lifeless husk. The killer had then, with an artist's meticulousness, used her very life force as paint. The organic residue near the window was later identified as a rare, fast-acting sedative, administered perhaps to subdue Eleanor before her torment began. The media erupted. The blood artist. They christened the unknown perpetrator. The story of Eleanor Vance and the gruesome mural went viral, dominating every news cycle, sparking fear and outrage across the nation. Psychologists, art critics, and criminal profilers flocked to the airwaves, each offering their theories. Was it a ritual, A political statement? The work of a deranged artist exacting revenge? Corbin found himself consumed. He pored over the crime scene photos, zooming in on every brushstroke, every detail of the Weeping Oracle. The killer had left no obvious signature, no calling card beyond the gruesome masterpiece itself. There was no forced entry, no signs of struggle beyond the final, desperate movements captured in the arterial spray pattern on the ceiling. Eleanor had likely known her killer, or been too sedated to resist. The first few weeks yielded nothing. The intricate runes remained indecipherable. The symbolism of the weeping woman was vague enough to be open to endless, terrifying interpretations. The city held its breath, a collective sense of unease settling over its inhabitants. Every shadow seemed to harbor a threat, every stranger a potential monster. Corbin knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this wasn't the end. The Weeping Oracle was just the first stroke on a much larger, much darker canvas. The sanguine artist was just beginning their macabre exhibition. Weeks bled into a month, and the city held its breath, hoping the nightmare had been a singular, terrifying anomaly. The LAPD's Special Task Force, led by Corbin, followed every dead-end lead, chased every anonymous tip. The fear began to recede, replaced by a nervous vigilance. Then the second stroke. This time, the victim was Martin Hayes, a disgraced art critic known for his venomous reviews and his penchant for making enemies. Hayes, in his early 50s, was found in his sprawling, minimalist loft in the trendy arts district. His death mirrored Eleanor Vance's with chilling precision. The same precise throat slit, the same complete exsanguination. And, of course, the art. On the polished concrete floor of his loft, a sprawling, intricate map had been drawn. It wasn't a literal map of streets or landmarks, but a convoluted, spiraling labyrinth of lines and symbols, almost like a complex circuit board or an ancient astrological chart. At its center lay a single, perfectly rendered human eye, staring upwards, rimmed with a halo of smaller, almost imperceptible dots. The piece was titled, in the macabre lexicon of the media, The Labyrinth of Doubt. Corbin surveyed the scene, his stomach churning with a familiar dread. This was a serial killer, no longer a horrifying possibility but a stark, undeniable reality. The killer had upped their game. The previous mural was on a wall, relatively two-dimensional. This was a floor piece, requiring a different perspective, more time, and perhaps even more elaborate planning. The blood had been mixed with a fixative, ensuring its longevity, a perverse testament to the killer's artistic intent. The distinct difference in victims was immediately apparent. Eleanor Vance, the quiet accountant, versus Martin Hayes, the outspoken critic. What was the connection? The art was the only consistent thread. The FBI, recognizing the escalating threat and the sheer psychological impact on the nation, dispatched Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned behavioral analyst, to assist the task force. Dr. Reed was an academic-turned-profiler, sharp, meticulous, and with an uncanny ability to delve into the minds of monsters. She had a calm demeanor that belied a steel-trap intellect. Their first meeting was tense. Corbin, a man of instinct and street smarts, found Reed's analytical, almost academic approach frustrating. "We need to find who did this, doctor, not write a thesis on their psychological trauma." Reed met his gaze unflustered. Understanding the why is often the fastest route to the who. Detective, this isn't random violence. This is communication. Every stroke, every drop of blood, is a word in a horrifying message. Reed immediately focused on the art itself. She spent hours analyzing both the Weeping Oracle and the Labyrinth of Doubt, looking for commonalities in technique, symbolism, and even the chemical composition of the blood. Her initial theory was audacious. The killer was an artist, a frustrated one, perhaps. Someone with a deep understanding of art history, symbolism, and the human form. And the victims? She theorized they weren't just canvases, but part of the narrative itself. "Look at the style, detective," Reed explained, pointing to detailed photos. "The first piece, the Weeping Oracle, suggests despair, a voiceless suffering. The victim, Eleanor Vance, was anonymous, a blank slate onto which the killer projected this pain. Now, the labyrinth of doubt, found at an art critic's home. A critic who specialized in dissecting and often demeaning others' work. The labyrinth symbol, the all-seeing eye. It suggests confusion, misdirection, perhaps even judgment. Corbin grudgingly conceded her point. The killer wasn't just displaying art. They were telling a story, one victim at a time. The public was terrified, a morbid fascination gripping the nation as every detail of the blood artist's latest masterpiece was dissected. People began to lock their doors earlier, avoid walking alone, and cast suspicious glances at strangers. A palpable sense of dread permeated the city. Then the third victim, Sarah Jenkins, a prominent gallery owner and patron of experimental art, was found 3 weeks later. Her body, drained of blood like the others, was discovered in the sterile, brightly lit main exhibition hall of her own gallery. The art, this time, was a colossal, sprawling mural on the gallery's tallest wall, depicting a grotesque, skeletal hand reaching out from a swirling vortex, clutching a broken paintbrush. Above it, emblazoned in jagged, furious strokes, were fragments of critical reviews, seemingly taken from various publications, each one harsh and dismissive. This piece, dubbed the Crimson Critique, was the most terrifying and personal yet. Reed stood before it, a new kind of chilling certainty in her eyes. "Detective," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The targets are connected to the art world." Eleanor Vance was an accountant for several galleries, including Jenkins, Martin Hayes, the critic, Sarah Jenkins, the owner, and the art itself. It's a direct response to criticism. This isn't just an artist. This is an artist scorned. An artist whose work was rejected, ridiculed, perhaps even destroyed. And now, they're creating their ultimate collection, with the very people they believe held them back as both the medium and the message. The implications were staggering. The sanguine artist wasn't just a murderer. They were a vengeful creator, building a monument of blood to their own perceived genius and the injustice they felt they had suffered. The message was becoming terrifyingly clear, and the canvas was far from complete. The revelation that the victims were all connected to the art world, specifically to its more critical and exclusionary elements, sent a jolt of clarity through the investigation. Corbin and Reed now had a direction, albeit a terrifying one. The sanguine artist wasn't a random killer. They were a judge, jury, and executioner, meticulously crafting a narrative of retribution. Reed worked tirelessly, compiling a list of artists whose careers had been irrevocably damaged by negative reviews, failed exhibitions, or public scorn, particularly focusing on those who had ties to Vance, Hayes, or Jenkins. The list was long, filled with broken dreams and simmering resentments. The organic residue from Eleanor Vance's home, still unidentifiable, continued to haunt them. It was a plant-based sedative, but from a species so rare it baffled botanists. Then a breakthrough. While analyzing the chemical composition of the blood used in the Crimson Critique, forensic specialists discovered a unique trace element, a particular pigment found only in a specific, artisanal brand of oil paints. This pigment, Viridian Shadow, was known for its deep, almost black-green hue, favored by a niche group of artists. Further investigation revealed that this artisanal paint company had only one distributor in the entire state, and their client list was exclusive. Cross-referencing this client list with Reed's roster of scorned artists, a single name emerged: Julian Thorne. Thorne was a once promising abstract expressionist whose controversial debut exhibition, The Visceral Truth, a collection of stark, emotionally charged paintings, had been universally panned a decade ago. Martin Hayes had written a particularly scathing review, calling Thorne's work a juvenile outpouring of narcissistic angst, lacking both skill and substance. Sarah Jenkins had refused to even show his pieces, and Eleanor Vance had handled the initial, disastrous accounting for the short-lived exhibition, inadvertently processing the losses that ended Thorne's career. After the exhibition's failure, Thorne had vanished from the art scene, a ghost haunting the periphery of the artistic community. His last known address was a dilapidated warehouse studio in a forgotten industrial section of East LA. The organic residue finally clicked into place. Julian Thorne, in his brief attempt at self-sufficiency, had cultivated a small, highly specialized garden on the roof of his warehouse, experimenting with rare plants. Among them, a species known for its potent sedative properties, matching the forensic findings. Corbin and Reed, along with a heavily armed tactical unit, converged on Thorne's warehouse. The air was thick with tension, the knowledge that they were finally closing in on a monster who saw himself as a martyr. As they breached the metal door, the scene inside stole their breath. The vast space was a chilling tableau. Canvases of every size were stacked against walls, some complete, some half-finished. But it was the central display that seized their attention. A figure, tall and gaunt, stood before a massive, pristine white canvas, his back to them. He held a custom-made brush, its bristles stained crimson. The air was heavy with the familiar, metallic scent of fresh blood. On the canvas, a partially completed portrait was emerging. A meticulously rendered, utterly lifelike depiction of a man, his features twisted in a mask of fear. This was the portrait of retribution. The man turned slowly. Julian Thorne, his eyes, sunken and feverish, burned with a terrifying intensity. He was holding a blood-stained scalpel in one hand, and with the other, he gestured proudly at his work. Magnificent, isn't it? Thorne's voice was hoarse, yet filled with a maniacal pride. My ultimate masterpiece. They called my work derivative, amateurish. They destroyed my vision, but now they are the medium. Their essence fuels my truth. This is art untainted by critics, untarnished by commerce. Corbin's gaze swept the room, looking for a victim. His eyes fell on a slumped figure in a chair, tied and gagged a man, clearly terrified but alive. Dr. Alexander Sterling, the art curator who had penned the most damning review of Thorne's failed exhibition. He was to be Thorne's final subject, his blood the last pigment for the magnum opus. It ends now, Thorne, Corbin stated, his voice firm, gun raised. Thorne laughed, a high-pitched, chilling sound. Ends? Oh no, detective. This is just the beginning. The world will finally see what true art is. The purity of suffering, the truth in the visceral. He took a step towards Sterling, raising the scalpel. Reed, stepping forward slightly, her voice calm and steady, interjected, Julian, this isn't art. This is a scream, a desperate cry for recognition, yes, but it's stained with fear, not truth. Your genius, if it existed, is lost in this grotesque act. You've become the very thing you despised, a destroyer, not a creator. Her words seemed to momentarily pierce Thorne's delusion, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. He hesitated, the scalpel trembling. It was the opening Corbin needed. In a swift, practiced movement, Corbin lunged, disarming Thorne before he could react. The tactical unit moved in, securing the killer and freeing a petrified Dr. Sterling. Julian Thorne, the sanguine artist, was finally apprehended. The city of Los Angeles exhaled, a collective sigh of relief mixed with a lingering trauma. The blood artist had been stopped. His reign of terror concluded. In the aftermath, the story of Julian Thorne dominated global headlines. Psychologists debated his motives. Art critics wrestled with the disturbing question of whether his horrific creations could, in any twisted sense, be considered art. Corbin and Reed, scarred but resolute, watched as the city began its slow, painful process of healing. The memory of the blood-painted murals, the weeping oracle, the labyrinth of doubt, and the crimson critique would forever be etched into the collective consciousness of America. They served as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most profound darkness isn't born in the shadows, but painted in crimson, under the glaring spotlight of a world too quick to judge and too slow to truly see. Julian Thorne's final, horrifying masterpiece was not on a canvas, but in the indelible stain he left on the human soul.